Let's move on to our next Ask Me Anything segment. Andy Burnham, you are now in the spotlight. Yvette Cooper, would you like to ask the first question?
So, Andy, do you regret privatising NHS Logistics?
It's a good question. It's a fair question. I was a junior minister at the time and I didn't have much say over it, to be honest. It was something that Number 10 had decided to do. I went through a long debate with the trade unions and there was an argument for doing it because NHS Logistics was basically lorries, depots, bandages, syringes, all the kind of stuff that the NHS needs. It wasn't clinical services at all, and indeed wasn't a service that people would think is in the NHS. But it began to change my view about the role of the private sector in the NHS. And as Health Secretary in 2009, I changed Labour's policy on the market and the use of the private sector. And I don't remember getting much support from people when I did that. But I stick true to that because I believe the NHS should be about people, not profits. There is an argument to be had about the level of involvement when it comes to additional services or services on the margins. But that wasn't a decision in my gift, to be honest. I was told to do it.
The reason for asking is just simply if it's different things that you've said at different times, and obviously that's why I was keen to hear the answer to the question. No, I mean,
as you know, Yvette, you get the chance when you're in the top job, don't you, in the department to really put your stamp on things. And I came into the Department of Health in 2009 and I found, in my view, a situation where the market had been allowed to advance too far into the NHS. And it matters then, doesn't it? The test of all of us is what did you do then when you were there on the spot? And I changed Labour policy and I don't remember getting much support from you at the time or indeed anybody else around the cabinet table, but there we are.
Yeah, but it's not just about the decisions that you take as a Secretary of State. It's also about actually the influence that you have as a junior minister and whether you can persuade people and the arguments that you have as well. And it's about, I think as well, not just saying different things at different times.
He wasn't very good, that's what you're saying, isn't it?
What, because he couldn't persuade his bosses?
I think Yvette's trying to say that. Yvette's trying to say that I was.
I think she's saying he wasn't a very good junior minister.
Trying to say I was being inconsistent. I mean, if you look back, I was questioning Number 10 all the time who were pushing this, whether this was the right thing to do, because I am not somebody who by instinct wants to privatise.
Well, wasn't
my parliamentary record has shown
privatised under your watch, wasn't there?
Well, no, this is another thing, actually, because I inherited that situation. So I inherited a situation where...
You could have reversed
let me answer the question. I inherited a situation where a process had been set in place over the future of Hinchinbrook Hospital. And when I came in, this is one of the reasons why I changed policy. I changed the policy.
Change that one. You could have done, but you didn't.
I did. I changed the policy to NHS preferred provider. And that was then the regime under which that would have been considered. But the point being, which is the point that I've consistently made, it was privatised by the coalition, not by the last Labour government.
It was started under your watch.
The process was started, I think, under the previous Secretary of State to me, so not by me.
Liz Kendall.
We suffered the worst defeat in a generation. Do you still think the manifesto was the best you'd ever stood on?
In my constituency, Liz, is what I say.
Didn't say that. It was at the GMB.
Because you stand on a manifesto, don't you, in front of your own local voters. I think it gave me more to say to people than the 2001, the 2005 or the 2010 manifestos. It had more of direct relevance to those people because Ed, in my view, rightly put his finger on the growing insecurity in the workplace. And that spoke to a lot of people in my constituency. And I'm quite proud to have increased my majority by over 2,000 on the back of that manifesto.
You can't stack up votes in safe seats. You've got to get votes back, and it didn't resonate with the rest of the country.
That's why I've also said that the last election, for me, the general rule was the longer the drive you were walking down to knock on the door, the less you had to say to the people who answered at the door, because the manifesto was too narrow in its appeal. It had a lot to say to constituencies like mine, but not enough to say to the country.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Andy, you've made some really good points about adult social care and the crisis of it. And as Health Secretary, you grappled with the whole problem of elderly people, dependent elderly, usually not being able to get out of hospital and get into local authority care. It's a huge issue. And you tried to set up a joint approach and a joint agency. The problem we have at the moment is the enormous cuts.
We need a question.
The question is this: the problem that we have at the moment is the enormous cuts in local authority budgets means we're getting into bed blocking back into the NHS, and there's no move on. you support the principle of austerity, light. Therefore, the biggest area of cut was going to be
Jeremy,
under our
really
government. So are you still supporting the idea that we cut local authority expenditure, knowing full well what the problems are going to be for adult social care?
I don't support austerity light in those words, Jeremy. But if you look back
Would you
at the
support
last
austerity then?
Look back at the last Parliament. I, at the beginning of the last Parliament, said to the government, said to Cameron, do not cut social care, because in the end it will create a problem in the NHS. I said, don't give all the money to the NHS, use some of it to support social care, and they didn't do it, and I think we're reaping the consequences of that now with too many people stuck in hospital. But
would you bring adult social care into the NHS?
Yeah, and that's where I think you and I may agree, because what I would do is pay differently, ask people to pay differently for social care. That is on the NHS principle. So everybody contributes, but then everybody's covered. And do you know, Liz, I'm going to make a difficult argument in this campaign for this, because I just believe this passionately, that we should have an NHS that covers all of people's needs, physical, mental, social, and it should be paid for on the same principle where everyone contributes and everyone's covered. And I think the country will believe in it and go for it.
How much would that cost, do you think, Andy?
Well,
to pay for entire social care through what, general taxation?
No, it's not. It's about paying for it differently, because people are already paying for social care. They're just paying in the most unfair way imaginable.
How much would it cost?
Does that answer the point?
You said we need to get
paying anyway, but they're paying in the most unfair way, where somebody with dementia pays with everything that they've got, everything that they've worked for.
How much would it cost if we're going to get our economic credibility back?
But economic credibility comes from giving people a service that supports people who care, as you've said. I think you've made that point. Supports people who are carers, so that they can remain in work later into life. It would be a big change.
Would you do it through a direct taxation?
I would do it through asking people to make a contribution.
What, through taxation? Or
either at 65 or from what they leave behind. And, you know, in this campaign, I'm going to be prepared. Yes. And I'm going to be prepared, which I don't think some of you others are doing, to make a big argument for a national health and care service, because I think this contest needs big ideas and the traditions of the Labour Party.
This is a subject we could talk about for the next 45 minutes, but we're not going to.
And how much of their house or their
Liz, we're going to move on now. That's Andy. That's the end of that segment for you.
The thing I've been worrying about is if they're going to run the trains 24 hours at the weekends.
Yes.
When are they going to do the maintenance? Because they can't cope with the maintenance now. So with extra running,
yeah,